General Hospital teasers for the next 2 weeks, September 1st to September 12th, predict that someone will seek vengeance on Drew Kane and cause a daddy issue for Scout Quartermain. Jason Morgan will also encounter a major twist, so let's talk about all of the surprises to come. The week of September 1st to 5th will begin with a rerun on Monday, September 1st, followed by brand new episodes. Sonny Corinthos will help Danny Morgan and Rocco Falconeri cope with the body they discovered. Of course, the body will be identified as Judge Eva Heron. Jen Sidwell is probably to fault for getting rid of Judge Heron before she could reveal too much to Sonny. Meanwhile, Willow Tate's decision to reconcile with Drew for the purpose of the custody dispute will raise concerns for Harrison Chase. Lucas Jones will urge Elizabeth Baldwin to be cautious. Liz may be becoming too involved in Willow's problems for Lucas. Portia Robinson is also planning an announcement, so we'll see if it's about her divorce from Curtis Ashford or something else. Curtis will confide in Jordan Ashford, so he may reveal there was some truth to Portia's claim that his heart still belongs to his ex. Next, there will be a 911 call and a crime that will shake Port Charles to its core. Assuming this is not related to what occurred to Judge Heron, this could be the ultimate blow for Drew. Someone may attempt to eliminate Drew and leave him clinging to life somewhere. Drew may be rushed to GH in a critical fight for survival, while Chase and Anna Devane eventually question some suspects. Nina Reeves will engage in some dangerous activity. We'll see Nina take a risk of some kind, so maybe she'll hide some evidence if it appears Willow went after Drew. Trina Robinson also has some tense moments ahead of her, so she may get concerned that Portia, Curtis, or perhaps Kai Taylor went too far against Drew. Michael Corinthos will ultimately receive updates on some new information, and we'll see if it's relevant to Drew's situation. On another note, Jason will be surprised, while Jocelyn Jackson Vaughn are concerned that they will not survive their mission. Jason may ride to the rescue after Britt Westbourne uses that burner phone to summon him back to the Five Poppies resort. Jack Brennan, on the other hand, will utilize his manipulative skills to his advantage when it comes to Anna and everything he is attempting to keep from her. Fans may witness the repercussions of Jason saving Jocelyn and Vaughn between September 8th and 12th. If Jason comes through for the WSB duo, he will have a lot of questions and concerns. Nonetheless, Jocelyn will survive this horror and will eventually be able to return home to Carly. When Jason discovers Jocelyn's WSB agent status, would he be willing to keep silent or insist that Carly know the truth? Of course, we need talk about hostage Rick Lansing, as Molly Lansing Davis may detect he is missing. The same goes for Elizabeth Baldwin, thus she may investigate Rick's disappearance. Alexis Davis, Christina Corinthos Davis, and Ava Jerome will try to cover their tracks, but this Rick disaster will be more difficult than they anticipated. Scout may get terrified and severely disturbed by Drew's whodunit scenario. Scout may worry about losing another parent. There's also Ryan Pavy's impending return, so GH writers will create the stage for his return, whether as Nathan or another character associated with the project at the Five Poppies resort. According to General Hospital spoilers, Willow Tate may lose her cool as Drew Kane breaks his pledge. Will Judge Eva Heron's death cause a nasty meltdown? Someone is about to try to kill Drew, and the writing is on the wall. Other characters are threatening Drew on a regular basis, so everything is falling into place for the long-awaited whodunit. Willow is one of the few people in Port Charles that still wants Drew alive. Willow believes Drew is her only choice for reuniting with her children, but she may not feel this way for long. Willow must be on the suspect list if somebody is going to try to wipe Drew off the map. It would be ridiculous to exclude Willow from any potential mystery plot, so she needs another cause to turn against Drew. Perhaps Judge Heron's abrupt death is related to that. Now that Judge Heron has been discovered floating in the water, she cannot be questioned or provide any confirmation of the bribe she accepted. Drew has no evidence that Judge Heron received this bribe at all. Drew is now relying solely on information obtained from Marco Rios, but Sidwell may take steps to disrupt any probe into Judge Heron's financial information. Drew has been acting as if he can obtain a new judge who is more favorable, but wouldn't he have done it the first time if he could? Whether Willow believes Sonny Corinthos is behind the bribery plot or not, she may be concerned that Drew will be unable to prove anything and that the next judge will not find in her favor. In addition, Michael Corinthos was heated up enough to discuss postponing the visitation hearing indefinitely following Drew's most recent threats. Willow may soon accuse Drew for killing Judge Heron and lose her cool over this visitation hearing, which is repeatedly halted. Drew will be full of broken promises for the umpteenth time, so Willow could be pushed over the edge. Willow might probably join the suspect pool once the whodunit begins, so stay tuned for any shocking Drew news to come. Cameron Matheson just stated on Instagram that he would not be leaving the program, suggesting that Drew may escape the next assassination attempt. However, GH writers could still get a lot of drama out of someone attempting to erase Drew permanently. The tension inside Port Charles was gradually building as Drew became entangled in a hazardous game that was spiraling out of hand. Everything he believed he had secured was sliding through his fingers, and the weight of his choices was threatening to overwhelm him. Drew had assumed for months that he had the upper hand, skillfully tugging the strings and ensuring that no one knew how far he had gone to safeguard his image and rising power. But the reality was considerably more difficult than he cared to admit. Secrets had a tendency of surfacing, and this time, the truth threatened not only his reputation, but everything and everyone he loved about, including Scout. Scout had always been Drew's soft spot, his anchor in a tumultuous world, but the fissures in their relationship became more obvious with each passing day. Sam's developing distrust of Drew didn't help matters either. She had begun to notice small changes in his conduct, such as the late nights, the furtive phone calls, and the defensiveness whenever Jason's name was mentioned. Sam tried to give Drew the benefit of the doubt, but her instincts told her that something much deeper was going on. It wasn't simply about custody or parenting disputes anymore. There was a deep, hideous layer beneath the surface that, if revealed, had the potential to shatter Scout's world forever. What Sam didn't realize was that Drew had been concealing far more than unethical business transactions. He had formed relationships with people whose aims were far from pure, in the hopes of strengthening his position in Port Charles. But every favor had a cost, and those prices were building up in ways Drew hadn't expected. The greatest threat, however, was Jason. Their relationship had always been strained, but Drew's recent actions had pushed things beyond the point of no return. Jason was more than just skeptical, he was determined to find out the truth, and Drew knew there was no turning back. Jason had been keeping his distance from Drew for months, but recent circumstances had pushed him back into the fray. He couldn't ignore the whispers anymore, especially as they circled back to Scout. Jason had promised Sam years ago that he would always safeguard his daughter, even if it meant addressing Drew directly. However, what he discovered during his discreet research stunned him. Drew wasn't just keeping secrets, he was sitting on a tinderbox of hazardous information, and he wasn't the only one pulling the strings. Someone strong was working behind the scenes, manipulating Drew and using Scout as leverage to compel him into decisions he would not have made otherwise. The surprise came when Jason discovered a secret file connecting Drew to a covert deal involving offshore accounts, a missing crucial witness, and a criminal group operating under the radar in Port Charles. At first, Jason assumed it was about money, but as he probed more, it grew more personal. There were documents implicating Drew in decisions that directly affected Scout's future, decisions that Sam had not agreed to, and Jason was now faced with an impossible choice: expose Drew and risk destroying Scout's trust in her father, or keep the secret and quietly bring down the organization. However, Jason was not the only one plotting behind the scenes. Carly had picked up on the building tension and was gradually connecting the dots on her own. She knew Drew was trying to control his narrative, but desperation made people sloppy, and Carly had a talent for discovering leverage where no one else did. She had overheard a furious conversation between Drew and a mysterious acquaintance at the Metro Court, and while she didn't have the whole picture yet, she could smell trouble building. Carly didn't want to involve Jason just yet, but she wasn't going to stand by and watch Drew's decisions pull everyone she cared about into a nightmare. Meanwhile, Scout had begun to pick up on the strained vibe about her, recognizing that something was seriously wrong despite the grown-ups' attempts to shelter her from the reality. Her hushed questions, "Why are you and Daddy fighting?" Why is Jason so angry? It hurt deeper than anyone cared to admit. Sam sought to console her daughter without disclosing too much, but it was becoming impossible to keep the illusion that everything was normal. Drew's irregular judgments had put Scout in the middle of a storm she didn't understand, and the guilt was beginning to eat away at him. The breaking point came one night when Jason approached Drew directly in his penthouse. There were no cameras or witnesses, only the raw tension between two guys who had been locked in a silent rivalry for years and was finally bursting. Jason did not waste time on small conversation. He presented the information he had gathered, the documentation linking Drew to the offshore accounts, and the risks Scout faced as a result of his decisions. Drew attempted to deflect at first, claiming Jason did not comprehend the entire tale, but when Jason pressed harder, Drew's barriers crumbled. The truth came out in shards, enough for Jason to conclude Drew had been duped, but also enough to demonstrate Drew had voluntarily entered into perilous area, knowing the risks. Jason's rage was fueled not only by Drew's poor decisions, but also by treachery. Drew knew Jason would do anything to protect Scout, but he had chosen secret over trust, and Scout was now paying the price. For Jason, that crossed a line that could not be reversed. But before he could make his next move, Carly walked in with her own revelation. She had traced down Drew's mysterious contact and learned that the group tugging Drew's strings was linked to someone inside Port Charles no one would have suspected, Valentine Cassadine. Valentine's intervention altered everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Drew making shady transactions, it was about a wider power move that endangered everyone associated with the Corinthos family. Valentine had strategically positioned himself to seize control of crucial assets via Drew, using Scout as the final leverage. Jason saw the danger right once. Valentine always played games when the stakes were high, and if Scout was being used as a negotiating chip, everyone was in far more risk than they thought. Sam found herself trapped between two fires. She wanted to protect Scout at all means, but she knew Jason and Drew were both in perilous situations. Her rage at Drew was mitigated by the understanding that he had been compelled into some of his decisions, but it did not undo the harm. At the same time, Jason's drive to do things his way implied that he was willing to take chances that worried her. She attempted to persuade him to slow down and consider each move carefully, but Jason had already set his sights on dismantling Valentine's network piece by piece. As the layers peeled back, additional secrets emerged, hidden accounts, encrypted correspondence, and a series of clandestine meetings that hinted to a far larger plot. Drew understood too late that he was merely a piece in a game that had been ongoing for years. Every action he had made believing he was in charge had been calculated by someone else. That knowledge hit him hard, especially when he considered what it meant to Scout. If Jason hadn't intervened, Scout may have been caught in the crossfire of a war she had nothing to do with, and Drew couldn't get over his shame over it. The true twist came when Jason discovered a hidden clause in one of Valentine's agreements, which linked everything back to Helena Cassadine's old files. Information buried within the encrypted data has the potential to shift Drew's entire understanding of his relationship with Scout. There was evidence that Valentine had gotten secret medical data, which indicated that someone had tampered with paternity results years earlier. Jason didn't want to accept it at first, but as he dug deeper, it became clear, Drew might not be Scout's biological father at all. The discovery threatened to shatter the entire family. Sam was taken aback, Drew was stunned, and Jason found himself in unfamiliar terrain. If the documents were correct, Scout's entire identity was bound up in a secret that had been kept concealed for years, and the fallout may ruin any hope of reconciliation between them. But Jason refused to give up until he discovered the truth, which meant delving further into Valentine's files, a move that put him squarely in the crosshairs of those who would go to any length to keep those secrets hidden. As the walls closed in, Drew was forced to make a decision he never expected: fight to preserve his position in Scout's life, even if the truth was against him, or stand aside and risk losing her for good. Meanwhile, Jason was forced to address his own sentiments regarding the implications for his relationship with Scout and Sam. Emotions were running hot, loyalties were shifting, and the family's delicate equilibrium was on the verge of collapse. By the time the dust settled, nothing in Port Charles would be the same. Jason had revealed Valentine's deception, but the harm had already been done. Drew's credibility had been broken, Sam was left to piece together Scout's future, and the news regarding her paternity was poised to send shockwaves throughout the town. The fight was far from over, in many respects, it was only getting started, but one thing was certain, Jason, Drew, and Scout's friendship would never be the same again. Willow had spent days hiding her feelings, attempting to hold herself together as everything around her disintegrated, but it all came tumbling down when she discovered Drew's broken promise. For weeks, she had clung to his promise, convinced that no matter what happened, he would support her, protect her family, and make decisions in her best interests. But that illusion was broken when she found he had gone behind her back, making decisions that touched not only her but also jeopardized her entire future. The treachery wounded worse than she thought, sending her into a rage and frustration she couldn't control. When she addressed Drew, her voice quivered, not from fear, but from wrath. She had never wanted to think he could lie to her, especially after everything they had been through together, after she had stood by him in his darkest moments and forgave sins that would have broken most people. But the gravity of his deeds was now clear, and Willow could not look at him without feeling deceived. Drew tried to justify himself, stating that he was trying to protect her and was doing everything he could to keep their family safe, but his excuses only inflamed her rage. This was not about protection, according to her. It was about trust, and he had taken away her power to make her own decisions. The tension between them became terrible, spilling into their home and upsetting everyone around them. Michael, sensing Willow's mounting concern, attempted to intervene and mediate, but his presence seemed to exacerbate the situation. Drew disliked Michael's intervention, and Willow couldn't bear the thought of anyone supporting Drew's behavior when she felt so betrayed. What had seemed like a united front between them had broken into something volatile, unstable, and dangerous. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed their chats, wondering when things had gotten so bad, and how she could have missed the clues that Drew was hiding something so important. Then came the shocking news of Judge Heron's untimely and suspicious death at Port Charles. The announcement reverberated around the community like a shockwave, prompting questions no one wanted to voice aloud. Judge Heron was closely involved in various cases, including those involving the Corinthos family and Drew's own legal issues. It didn't take long for rumors to circulate that his death may not have been accidental. Rumors suggested manipulation, cover-ups, and revenge-driven motivations. And as Willow considered the enormity of the situation, something inside her snapped even more. Drew's secrecy, broken promises, calls he avoided answering, and sudden disappearances late at night all began to make sense to her. Part of her refused to believe he was capable of anything criminal, but she couldn't deny the possibility. Drew had always been prepared to break the rules to protect his family, but what if he went too far this time? What if Judge Heron's death was not a coincidence, but rather part of a larger and more sinister plan? Willow's thoughts continued late into the night, each option darker than the last. She found herself revisiting talks she had with Judge Heron during the custody dispute, understanding how many people in Port Charles wanted him gone. But when she thought about Drew's recent acts, something about the timing bothered her. He had promised her that everything was under control and that she didn't need to worry, but here she was, in the midst of pandemonium, with more questions than answers. Drew's recent decisions appeared to be meticulously calculated, and the more she thought about it, the more certain she grew that he was concealing far more from her than she could bear. Willow overheard an angry phone discussion between Drew and an unknown person, which worsened the situation. He was furious, his voice harsh and controlled, instructing the other guy to clean everything up before they began digging. She halted where she was, her breath seizing in her throat as the weight of his words hit her. Drew was usually protective, but this sounded far more hazardous. It was no longer simply about unfulfilled promises, it was about secrets with the potential to destroy everything. When he saw her standing there, his face paled for a second, but he swiftly concealed it with calm reassurance, telling her it wasn't what she expected. But Willow couldn't believe him this time. As Judge Heron's death began to dominate conversations in Port Charles, conjecture gave way to suspicion, which developed into fear. People started pointing fingers, and the whispers got louder with each passing day. The police quietly initiated an investigation, but they were not the only ones digging. Sonny, knowing that the balance of power in town was shifting, began conducting his own checks behind the scenes, desperate to safeguard his family from whatever storm was brewing. Michael took involved in the search for answers as well, wanting to protect Willow and the kids from any consequences, but his aggravation grew as he continued to find dead ends. Willow, meantime, felt herself drawn into an emotional war she was unprepared for. She had attempted to focus on the children, believing that immersing herself in their safety would provide her with clarity, but her thoughts kept returning to Drew. She wanted to believe in the guy she loved, but with each new deception revealed, her trust dwindled a bit more. Then came the breaking point. Someone sent her an anonymous message claiming to have evidence that Drew had met with someone involved in Judge Heron's final case. The message was ambiguous but ominous, implying that if she didn't stay quiet, her family would be next. Her hands trembled as she read it, and her pulse raced in her chest. Panic and wrath combined as she addressed Drew once more, this time demanding the truth. He claimed vehemently that he had nothing to do with the judge's death, but Willow couldn't help but notice something in his eyes, a flash of hesitation, a moment of uncertainty. It scared her more than anything he'd said. That brief pause revealed to her that, even if Drew hadn't been personally engaged, he knew far more than he admitted. By now, revenge had begun to sneak into Willow's head, uninvited but persistent. If Drew had endangered her family, if his broken promises had put them in the crossfire of something far greater than either of them could handle, she couldn't just sit back and do nothing. She began exploring on her own, reaching out to people she never expected to speak with, tracing connections between Drew, the judge, and the dark figures who appeared to be circling Port Charles like vultures. The more she discovered, the worse the image became, and it made her question everyone she believed she could trust. Even Michael began to notice changes in her conduct. She was agitated, distracted, and quick-tempered, snapping at him when he attempted to calm her down. He wanted her to take a step back before she got too involved in something harmful, but Willow refused. She couldn't stand by and watch as someone controlled her life, putting her children's safety at risk. And if it meant addressing Drew personally or revealing the truth herself, so be it. Everything came to a head when she uncovered a hidden file Drew had put away on his encrypted laptop, labeled solely with one name, Heron. Against her better judgment, she accessed it, her stomach twisting as she went through emails, conversations, and financial data that formed a bleak picture. It wasn't conclusive evidence, but it confirmed what she had suspected all along. Drew had communicated with persons connected to the judge in the days running up to his death. The timelines were too similar to be ignored as coincidence. Willow confronted Drew for the final time that night, her voice quivering with rage as she demanded answers he refused to provide. She told him she couldn't live like this any longer, locked in a never-ending cycle of fear and doubt, and that if he didn't come clean, she would go to the authorities herself. Drew, visibly shaken, implored her to trust him, stressing that all he had done was for their family, but his refusal to reveal the truth strengthened her determination. Willow's concerns were no longer limited to broken promises. This was about survival. The death of Judge Heron had sent shockwaves across Port Charles, but the aftershocks were only beginning. Willow found herself in the midst of a deadly maelstrom, where trust was no longer an option. She had no idea who was lying, who was protecting her, or who was pulling the strings from the shadows, but one thing was painfully clear: someone wanted retribution and was willing to harm anybody who stood in their way. Willow wasn't sure if Drew was the target or leading the attack. Willow spent the next 3 days restless, unable to escape the sense that her entire life was disintegrating. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Drew's face, the hesitancy in his gaze, and the truths he hesitated to reveal. She repeated their disputes in her head, wishing she could return to a period when she entirely trusted him and they were a family. But that moment seemed so distant now, hidden beneath layers of falsehoods and unresolved questions. She strolled through the home late one night, the silence crushing down on her like a burden she couldn't bear. Michael had fallen asleep on the couch, fatigued from hours of trying to calm her down, but Willow could not relax. Her mind was preoccupied with everything she discovered, including the encrypted files, phone calls, and anonymous threats. Nothing made sense, but everything felt related in ways she couldn't quite grasp. Her thoughts returned to Judge Heron's death and how quickly it had all occurred. He was alive 1 minute, presiding over cases that determined the fate of entire families in Port Charles, and then he was gone, leaving confusion, unsolved questions, and a power vacuum that everyone seemed frantic to fill. The fact that Drew's name kept coming up in regard to the judge made her stomach twist with fear. Willow despised even thinking about it, but she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that Drew's actions, whether intended or not, had set something hazardous into motion. By the morning, she had reached her breaking point. The atmosphere in the house was oppressive, and she couldn't take the silence anymore. She went straight to the courthouse, hoping to discover someone who could shed light on Judge Heron's last days. She met with a clerk, who hesitantly stated that Judge Heron had recently been under fire over a number of rulings related to high-profile cases involving the Corinthos organization. The cashier didn't say much, but it was enough to have Willow's heart racing. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone wanted Judge Heron out of the way, and if Drew was related to that person, they were in greater danger than she understood. When she returned home, Drew was waiting for her, his countenance a mix of concern and tiredness. He inquired as to her whereabouts, his voice quiet but tight, and Willow, for the first time, did not respond immediately. She examined him intently, noting how his jaw tensed and his palm balled into a fist when she mentioned the courthouse. He insisted again that she trust him, but Willow had reached the point where words were meaningless without proof. Their disagreement immediately escalated, with both of them yelling over each other and raising their voices until Michael appeared in the doorway, demanding they stop before things got entirely out of control. But Willow was unable to stop. Her rage had been building for far too long, and now it was spilling out, all the dread, betrayal, and fury of being kept in the dark. Drew remained there motionless for a long time, his countenance unreadable, before walking out of the house without saying anything. Willow slumped into the couch, tears burning her eyes. Michael tried to console her, but she barely heard him. She couldn't stop thinking about where Drew had gone and what he might be doing. A part of her wanted to follow him, to finally unearth the truth once and for all, but another part of her was afraid of what she could discover. That night, Port Charles felt heavier than ever, with shadows cast across every corner and secrets whispered across the streets. Word circulated fast that the inquiry into Judge Heron's death had been expanded, and whispers of vengeance grew stronger by the hour. Some assumed someone close to the judge had engineered his killing, while others feared a larger scheme involving ancient grudges and deadly ties. Willow knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same. Drew's broken promise had shattered more than just her trust, it had dragged her into a world of darkness and danger that she had no desire to be a part of. Every action she made now felt weighty, as if it was leading her closer to answers she wasn't sure she was ready for. Drew felt a growing concern that if she wasn't the perpetrator, someone else was, and they were closer than she thought.